Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today we are going to be wrapping up the books that I read in the months of July and in August. I've got a handy dandy list right here in my planner, so if I'm looking down, that's all I'm looking at. And we are just going to jump into this video and start in the month of July. So my average rating in the month of July was a 3.75. I had some real winners and I had some real misses. So let's just go in order of the books I read in the month of July. We started with a book I just randomly picked up on Everand because I needed something to listen to while I did chores, and that book was Never Lie by Miss Frida McFadden. Now, I'll give credit where credit is due. She writes a bingeable book. Didn't put it down, read it in less than a day, flew through it. However, I did find that it was a little bit on the predictable side. There was a twist that I didn't see coming, but the rest of them I did from a mile away, and that could just be me and the fact that I read a lot of thrillers, and so I've kind of started to figure out what's happening in a book, but also it didn't do anything groundbreaking. So what is this book about? Let me try and remember, because I literally read it 2 months ago. We have a couple and they are going to look at this house that they're considering buying. It's a very, very snowy day and they end up kind of getting isolated at this house, and they find out that it is the house of this psychiatrist or therapist, I can't remember, who was murdered supposedly by her boyfriend quite a while ago. And as they are kind of stuck and isolated in this house, they make some startling discoveries. And we're also getting kind of a past timeline with the therapist that previously owned the house. It was a wild time and I gave it a 2.5 star. Staying on the thriller train, I then picked up one of my most anticipated books of the year, and that was Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. Guys, I know that this book has been a hit for some people and a miss for some people all over the internet, but I am happy to say that it was a pretty big hit for me. We are following a group of kids growing up in the 90s in a neighborhood. It was very reminiscent of my childhood, how you would just go collect your neighbors and go off and play all day long and then come back home for dinner and everything was safe. But we are following our main character who is camping out with his best friend and neighbor in his backyard one night, and the next thing he knows, he wakes up and his neighbor, his best friend, is missing from the tent. The tent is slashed open, and obviously this is very traumatic for our main character. We then get a present timeline and our main character is having to move back to his childhood home and confront things going in his life currently, but also confronting his past and the disappearance of his best friend. And I thought that all of the twists were appropriate. I know in some of his previous year's works, Riley Sager has gone off the deep end with some of his twists, and I thought the twists in this book made sense. So it was a much quieter, much slower novel than we've gotten from Riley Sager in the past couple of years, but I really enjoyed it, and I will always pick up his books every summer that he has one released. So this was a 4-star for me. Next, I picked up another author who I have absolutely loved in the past, and that is Abby Jimenez. So I picked up The Friend Zone. This book was sent to me by my friend Kendall for my birthday last year, and I was very excited to pick it up and start her first series that she released. So in this book, we are following our main female character, and she is in a long distance relationship with her boyfriend who is in the military. He is planning on moving in as soon as he is done with his enlistment, and things are pretty normal between the two of them. Things do get a little bit complicated when our main character meets this firefighter that is connected to her best friend because her best friend's fiance is a firefighter, and they definitely develop a very, very strong friendship that verges on emotional cheating, I would say, and that is something that I don't like to read about in my books. But as the story progresses, our character does go make some smart decisions as she's stuck in this situation. There's also some really big topics in this book discussed, like fertility and wanting to have children and birth control. This book was really hard to rate for me because it had so many things in it that I don't like to read about, but at the same time it was Abby Jimenez doing her thing where she is very much exploring what makes a person and the connections between people. And so while it's definitely my least favorite Abby Jimenez that I've read so far, I can appreciate it for what it was, and I'm still excited to read the next 2 books in the first trilogy. So I gave this one a 3.75. Definitely my lowest Abby rating, but by no means a bad book. I just do want people to know that emotional cheating is present in this book. And as far as spice level in this one, I would give it a 1.5. out of 5. Like a little bit. There is spice in it, but it is very easily skippable. Next, I was just in a romance mood, so I picked up another romance, and this one was sent to me by my friend Corinna. This is In the Weeds by B.K. Borison. It is number 2 in the Love Light Farm series, and absolutely loved this romance. Like one of my favorites of the year, if not like the last 3 years that I've read. I loved it so much. In this book, we are following Beckett, who is kind of like the groundskeeper of Love Light Farms, and Evelyn, who is this social media influencer that really likes to highlight businesses and like make people aware of off the beaten path businesses. I kind of think of it like diners, drive-ins, and dives for Instagram that's not so commercialized. So these two met at a one-night stand, which was uncharacteristic for both of them, but that is how they met, and they both kind of went their own ways until in Love Light Farms, Evelyn comes back to do a spotlight feature on Love Light Farms, and it is there she encounters Beckett again. In this book, several months have passed, and Evelyn is kind of not getting to pull her own shots in the social media game anymore. She's got a management company, she has an agent, and she just doesn't feel happy anymore. What she's doing is not bringing her joy. So she decides to just put a pause on all of her social media and go to the last place where she felt truly happy, and that happens to be Love Light Farms. And when she returns, there is not a place to stay anywhere, and Beckett runs into her in town and is like, you know what, I have a huge house, nobody stays there, you can have the guest room. And this is just their love story, and their love story is very, very sweet. On top of that, I related a lot to Beckett. I loved his character. He experiences being overstimulated, and especially like auditorily overstimulated and socially overstimulated, and seeing how Evelyn kind of adapted to his needs without trying to change herself or change him was a very sweet part of the book that I really appreciated. On top of that, Love Light Farms and the town it takes place in, Inglewild, very much remind me of kind of like Stars Hollow. The relationships in here feel really real to me. They don't feel fabricated or forced just because it's a romance novel, and I'm so excited to finish this series very soon. I absolutely love the Love Light Farm series. 5 stars. Is there spice? Yes, this is probably like a 2 out of 5. After that, I was feeling a little bit spooky, a little bit horror-y, and I read my first T. Kingfisher, which is What Moves the Dead. Now, I don't think I gave this book a fair shot. I was reading this in the middle of Children of Eden, which is the musical that I participated in over the summer, and honestly, I cannot remember a thing that happens in What Moves the Dead except something with rabbits and mushrooms, and I feel like I was not fully focused on the book, and because of that, I gave it a 2.75. It's probably worth a reread for me eventually, but trying to sit here and wrap it up, I can't do it. So not a fair rating because I didn't read it, but this is my channel, and that's how I felt after finishing it because that's what I put in Storycraft. So What Moves the Dead, 2.75. Next, I read another horror book, and that was Nestlings by Nat Cassidy. Now, I don't have this book because it was part of my Sisterhood of the Traveling Books thing that I've been doing for the last several months, but this book was so cool, so gross, so disturbing, but so cool. I had a really good time reading this book. Cannot remember characters' names right now. Again, I shouldn't wait 2 months to wrap up a book. This book is about this couple, and the woman is disabled. She is paralyzed from a very traumatic childbirth experience. So we have the couple and we have their newborn child, and they are given this very cool opportunity to move into a very prestigious apartment in New York City. This is great for them because they have been living in a spot where like they are not happy with their landlord. Their landlord does not treat them very well, and it just wasn't a very great place to live. So they're very excited to move into this luxury apartment, but there's a couple of issues. I told you our protagonist is paralyzed and is in a wheelchair, and this apartment happens to be like a high rise, like it is up there. This is an initial concern for them, but they decide that the benefits greatly outweigh the cons and they move in. Our main character is stuck at home all day while her husband is off at work because again, she's paralyzed, and she is stuck at home with her baby. So she's going through some like postpartum issues because a lot of mothers do, but also she has this whole I'm paralyzed because of my child issue going on too. And not only that, but really weird things start happening around the apartment. Gargoyles, strange marks on her child, hearing voices. This book culminates so quickly into things that you would absolutely never expect to happen. This book was a great exploration of privilege and motherhood and what you are willing to sacrifice for yourself, but also what you're willing to sacrifice for your children. And it was like a really spooky time. I gave Nestlings 4 stars, and I really want to read Nat Cassidy's other book. I think it was called Mary. I want to read that one. The last book that I read in July was another romance, and this one was also sent to me by Corinna. I can't say thank you to her enough, but this is When in Rome by Sarah Adams. This book kind of took the world by storm last year or the year before, and for good reason, especially for all of us like Gilmore Girls loving chickadees out there. This book was just like adorable to the point where it was almost too adorable for me, but I'll get there in a second. We are following our main character, and she is a pop star, and she is very overwhelmed with her pop star life. I want you to think of the song I Can Do It With a Broken Heart by Taylor Swift. It's her. And so instead of doing it with a broken heart, she decides to just leave. So she takes inspiration from Audrey Hepburn, her absolute favorite movie star in the world, and decides to go to Rome. And since she can't just like hop on a plane and go to Rome, she goes to the nearest Rome that she can find, which is Rome, Kentucky. And as she is driving to Rome, Kentucky, her car breaks down. It happens to break down on the road beside our grumpy pie maker's house. And him, being the kind-hearted grump that he is, offers her a place to stay. And she ends up staying in Rome, Kentucky, and meeting all of the wonderful people of the town and learning about Noah, the grumpy pie maker, and falling in love. It was a very sweet story. As far as romance goes, this book has no spice. Sarah Adams' earlier books do not have any spice. So this one would be a safe one to read if you want closed door scenes only. It was cute, but like it got to the point towards the end of the book where it was so sickly sweet to me that I couldn't give it above a 4 star. So this was a 3.75 for me. I still want to keep reading Sarah Adams books because the 3 that I've read now, I did enjoy this one. I want a little bit more like grit to my romance books. Does that make sense at all? Like life isn't as sweet as this book was. And so I couldn't quite believe it. That's probably the best way to explain it. 3.75, I'll still keep reading Sarah Adams books, and a great one to pick up if you are a no spice or low spice reader. Now let's move on to August. August, I read 4 books, which is very low for me, but again, school started, but my average rating was a 4 star, and I gave all 4 books that I read 4 stars. So August, despite being a very hectic, very crazy month for me, was a great reading month. Start off August, I finished this book, City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. This was my Patreon series read-along. So every other month we pick up a book in the series that we're reading through, and that happens to be the Daevabad trilogy. And this was our first book ever that we were doing a series read along of. It's actually kind of the inspiration behind me even starting a Patreon. And this is a very Middle Eastern / Egyptian based fantasy in that we have our main character who lives in Cairo, Egypt, but very quickly she learns that she has powers and a connection to the Jinn and the David and all of these people that live in the City of Brass. And through a connection that she makes, she is swept away and immediately immersed in politics and love triangles and magic that she didn't see coming. We're following Nari, the main character I was just discussing, her point of view, but then we're also getting the point of view of a prince who has grown up in the City of Brass, who is the second born son to the king. The way that their paths cross and the politics that they both are getting involved in, things heat up and escalate very quickly. There is romance, but it is not romantasy, which is kind of like what I've been craving in my fantasy books. Romantasy is getting to be a little bit too much. I want the politics, I want the grit, I want the like epic world building dynamics where things going on in our character's head aren't just about how hot people are. So very much enjoyed this. I can't wait to pick up Kingdom of Copper and our live show that we're going to have in October. I felt like the live show we had for City of Brass is the best live show we've had since I started my Patreon, and I'm just really excited to continue the momentum and the excitement. If you do want to join and read this and then catch up with Kingdom of Copper, the link to my Patreon is down below. I try not to plug it too much, but we did have a really good discussion here. Another chunky book that I finished in August was a buddy read with my friend M on Instagram, and that was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. I really wanted to get to this one because I've had it from Book of the Month for forever. I've also really wanted to read more sci-fi, and with the announcement that a movie is going to be coming out for Project Hail Mary starring Ryan Gosling, I knew I had to read it. This book was amazing, but also like really hard to understand in spots. I am math brained. I'm a math teacher. I'm not necessarily science brained. And so there were some passages and sections of this book that were a little bit like overwhelming and over my head. And even though I was listening and reading along with the audiobook, I definitely zoned out in some of the more science heavy spots. But there is a connection that our main character, Ryland Grace, makes in this book that is so worth reading, and even more so worth listening to the audiobook. So if you pick it up, try and get the audio. It's only available through Audible, I believe. And what is this book even about? This book is about Ryland Grace, an astronaut who is basically the lone survivor on a mission to save the world. Literally Project Hail Mary, Earth's last shot at survival. And he takes all of this science and this care he has about the earth because he's a former teacher. And so like every decision he makes is, how is this going to affect the students that I taught? And as a teacher, I really liked that. There were also some like more mathematical experiments that he had to do while he was in space that my brain did connect with. And yeah, I can't wait to read other works by Andy Weir. This was my first one by him, and it definitely made me feel like sci-fi, even when I don't understand it, is more accessible than it seems to be in my brain. So thumbs up for this one, 4 stars. The next 2 books I'm going to talk about were both for in-person book clubs. The first one is Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. And this was just a really, really fun, self-aware murder mystery book that was kind of like trying to fall into the tropes of Agatha Christie and Sherlock Holmes, like these very popular mystery writers where we know the formula, we know the tropes, we know the rules they follow, and the author of the book and the narrator of the book also know the rules and know the tropes to follow. It was very self-aware, like the narrator would be speaking. His name was Ernie, and he would be like, now in murder mysteries, you know if something occurs here that you're gonna see it again, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you you're gonna see this again. And he would just like drop hints about characters and about things that were going to happen in future chapters. And he would like list out the rules for a murder mystery and tell you what page you were gonna find that rule accomplished on. And it was just really fun. So the book title, Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone, is true, but the way that he goes about explaining how everyone in his family has killed someone was very fun. And there is a murder that happens, and they're at this ski resort. It's kind of like a family reunion because Ernie's brother is about to get out of prison, and they're all meeting at this ski resort in order to kind of welcome him back into the family. However, when a murder at the ski resort happens and all of these people who have killed someone are there, obviously fingers are going to get pointed, accusations are going to get made, clues are going to be discovered, and murders are going to be solved. And the last book that I read was for my teacher friend book club. That was The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. Initially, I gave this book a 3.75. So if you follow me on Storygraph and that's what it says, I changed it in my head. I just might not have changed it over there yet. But this was a great book club pick, and the reason I rated it lower at first was because I started reading it during the school week. Guys, like when I tell you I get home from working with middle schoolers and my brain has room for nothing else, and this book was an amazing book. However, it didn't quite move quickly enough for my brain to like attach to it and connect to it during the work week. So it wasn't until I had a weekend where I could sit at home and do nothing but read this book that it really clicked and resonated with me. And once I got into it, I was into it. But what is this book about? This book is about a camp in the 70s, and we have this girl, her name is Barbara. She's actually the daughter of the family that owns the camp, and she goes missing. And this is already a big deal because obviously like missing children is horrifying, but it's even worse because 13 years ago, she had a brother named Bear who went missing, not at the camp, but on the property. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, is this related? Like this is going to be so devastating for the family. But that kind of sounds like it's leaning into thriller territory. And this was definitely what I would classify as a literary mystery. So we get this whole situation with Barb. We get points of views from her counselor. We get a point of view from a girl that she made friends with at camp. There's tons of point of view sprinkled in. So that is one timeline that we are following. But we are also getting several timelines that follow Barb's family throughout the past. We're seeing her mother from the time that she married her father and kind of the trajectory of their lives and their marriage. We get the point of view from a local firefighter who was looking for Barb's brother Bear when he went missing. There's a point of view from a female detective who decides to look into Barb's case. And this book explores so much. It explores like the difference between living off money and living off the land. It explores what I'd call like modern colonialism almost. It explores family and grief and rage and feminism, and it was a very, very powerful, compelling novel. I know some people do think it was slow, and I think to that I say, I recommend the book, but I want you to go into it not thinking of it as a thriller, but definitely as a literary fiction that leans into mystery. So do I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely. It's a very long book. It's a very slow moving book, but I think the payoff is worth it in the end. And that wraps up every single book that I read in July and August. Let me know if we had any similar books, similar ratings, or let me know if you disagreed with any of my ratings on the books that I talked about. I'm very excited to jump into September. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye, guys.